Okay, so now we are finally at the point where we can write or start writing our newsletter, outline our newsletter. Right now, what I like to do is I do this at the very start of my week so that as I'm consuming information, I can write things down. Uh, that'll make more sense. But one thing is that inside of the queue, there is the content ideas section. Now, in mine, I have a lot of content ideas, right? So I could pick one of these, and I've written about some of these. I'm actually writing about this one right now, which I will show you. But I also want to show you another method for how, like something we talked about earlier, where you can turn your high performing tweets into information. Nice. But let's look at some of my high performing tweets or just something that I want to write about, right? So let's look at these. If you're in your 20s, that would be a good one. Feel terrible. Let's see. So there's many different ways to generate ideas for this stuff. I mean, we'll talk about it in the tweet idea section because that's how you're going to get high performing tweets in order to turn those tweets into blog articles, right? Or the headline for the blog article. So let's look for a one-liner that did pretty well that I want to dissect. People throw away philosophical advice, question everything, especially the things that people think you are crazy for questioning. I think that would make a good content, right? Question everything. So, one, I'm going to copy this. You'll see why. But we're going to, at the start of each week, we're going to outline a newsletter. And the way you're going to do this is you're going to go to new, you're going to go to newsletter, template, and I'm going to open this as a full page. But then you just give it a title, right? For now, give it a title. You can change it later. If you already have an idea for a headline, go ahead and write that. If you already have more ideas for what you actually want to write, go ahead and do that. If you're writing the why behind a certain topic in your domain of mastery, go ahead and do that. If you're writing about the principles about a topic in your domain of mastery, write about that. But the main thing here that you have to understand is that, again, none of this is linear, right? If I want to go and start writing it immediately, I will. And I've done that. And I'll show you areas which I've done that. But the main thing is that this is just here to outline and plan. If you already have everything in mind for what you want to write, just go straight into writing it, right? You don't have to do this. This is only to help you structure things and create more depth behind your ideas. But the reason I copy pasted the tweet is because I'm going to paste that here, because then I can include it or link it in my newsletter to add some depth and allow me to kind of write based off of that. But the next thing in Quick Capture is this is what I go to when I'm listening to something related to question everything, and like I want to include it, right? So if I'm listening to an audiobook or I'm listening to a YouTube lecture on how you should be open-minded, then I can write down ideas that would be included in this actual article itself. And we'll go through a few of these. But another thing you can do here that is really helpful is, one, you can not only search your own tweets. So let's go to my profile. And if you haven't downloaded Twemex already, I've linked it a few times, I believe. You just go to twemex.com. And then when you're on your profile, not only can you look at your most recent tweets, but I can search for tweets that I want to include. The most enlightening is always asking a question before responding, reacting, or deciding. That one's good. So I will pop this in here. And of course, like, you have to have a lot of tweets in order to do this. This just gets easier with time, as everything in life does. But let's see. What can I do about it? We could talk about reframes, right? So now we're starting to generate ideas for the actual post and what it could be about. So I could talk about like 5 reframes to expand your mind. That's just an idea from what I got from the tweets. And of course, you can also look at your competitors or your tribe of mentors accounts, right? So let's say I like Naval. I actually use Naval's quotes quite a bit. I link his tweets because he just says things so freaking well. So let's see what he says about question. The most important question is not how do I get what I want? It's what do I want? That's interesting. The older the question, the older the answers. Damn. So these are all pretty old. Let's look at open-minded. Let's say critical. I'm trying to look for critical thinking. Yeah, there's none here, right? But then you capture these over time, where it's like you're going to have a database of tweets that you can look for. If something comes to mind about questioning everything inside of a book, then you can do that. I actually have one inside of. I'm writing this in the wrong place, but let's go to my writing hub. Right, and this is just an example. But I know that in the queue, inside of YouTube video notes, 65 principles, I can search in here, question, yeah. So I could copy and paste this into my research, and I could just put actualized 65 principles so I know where it's from. Include those there. There's no idea too sacred not to question. Question the things. These can be used as firepower for transitions in the actual thing. So we have those. That's good. Another thing you could do is look up quotes on questioning everything. Who's this from? Question everything, learn something, answer nothing. Mind that questions everything, unless strong enough to bear the weight of its ignorance, risks questioning itself and being engulfed in doubt. That one's solid. Question everything from Newton. Question everything, even if it represents generations of conventional wisdom. That's pretty good. Don't just teach your children to read, teach them to question what they read, teach them to question everything. So you could do deeper research onto this, and that's the thing. If you plan on giving credit to people, you can research and pull inspiration from anywhere. The books you read, really, quite literally anything. And then we still have a lot of information that we can go off of, but let's go back to this. So we have enough for research. We can add more to Quick Capture as things come to mind throughout the week, right? That's the purpose of this, is you add things as they come to mind on your walks, on other things throughout the week. Why does this work? Because you have set an intention to write a newsletter. When you have set an intention, every single life experience becomes firepower for that. It becomes energy. It becomes fuel. So when you're reading a book, and even if it's something random, right? Like you're hearing about dopamine, it may trigger the right thought process to give you the perfect idea, and that default mode network, when you're zoomed out and inward focus cognition, that will give you that big idea to put in here. They'll just come to you, right? And that's a skill that needs to be practiced. So after this, we go to planning. So this is where things get good. This is where we start pulling together an actual argument that we can get to. Now, as you can tell, if you've taken the 7 Days to Genius challenge, or if you're writing something that has been included in your, in your mind, right? Like if you want to write about the internet opening up the opportunity to do more, then you already have some of the problems, goals, advice, experiences, all that stuff written down. And then this would be a great topic to write about because you want to make it your own. You want to talk about it forever. You want people to associate this topic with you. So you're going to blast it long form, medium form, short form, get it in people's heads, right? With the content ecosystem. Now, since we're doing this around question everything, we're starting from scratch, but you don't have to. And that's the fun behind this, right? So who am I writing to? In this case, it will be people that want to get more out of life. This is a bit vague, but we'll start there, right? The topic is questioning everything or learning or open-mindedness, and then perspectives. So perspectives around question everything. This is difficult to come up with unless you have something at the top of mind. That's one other thing, is that all of these are optional. You do not need to fill out all of these. They're just here to give you ideas. And then when you start actually writing, more ideas will come to mind, right? And this is like, some people may be thinking like, oh, this is so drawn out. And it's like, okay, if it's so drawn out, why does it only take me 2 hours a week if I just go through and write it? And do you want to settle and be a commodity writer, right? You have to put effort into this. You have to be creative. And that's how you stand out. And that's how you get more eyes and traction on your profile, right? So perspectives related to question everything is there's like the religious perspective, or we'll just say religious perspective, where you must accept our dogma and ideology. You have the college, or let's just say like you have the school perspective, where you like do what I say, get your homework done, and try to get good grades. And so there's just a bunch of different perspectives on like being closed-minded and accept what you are told is true, right? So then goals related to the like questioning everything. I'm going to actually remove this. That doesn't add much clarity. And so you should see it like this. But your goals. So this is not only goals pertaining to where other people want to be, but they're also pertaining to where you want to be, because that's how you're going to attract people and be able to help the right people, is they're going to have similar goals as you, similar values, goals, priorities, etc. That's why people follow a personal brand, right? So your goals related to questioning everything is that you want to do what you enjoy for a living. Actualize your potential. Do the impossible and not end up mediocre, right? We can start there. So you can see things coming together, and like this alone, you could start writing an article on, or even tweets on, right? This is just good starting points for tweets. And then if you look up a tweet structure in Tweet Hunter and you switch some words out and you make it your own and you add a few lines, boom, you've got a great tweet written. Now, the big problem, or just problems associated with questioning everything, or people that want to get more out of life, is kind of the topic. Questioning everything, learning, open-mindedness, they're all the same, right? And we're writing a lot, so it doesn't have to be extremely focused. So big problem is that, one, bad common perspectives, close-mindedness, not knowing that you can achieve more because you can't see it. Big problem. Settling for a comfortable life when that is the greatest risk of them all. And now another thing you can see is that I've written a tweet on this before. I know that there's quotes relating to this. I know I have so many tweets relating to like self-improvement, actualizing your potential. I can go and I can look those up and I can add them to my research, so that way I can add more depth and more spacing in my actual newsletters themselves by including those tweets, right? So objections to open-mindedness is pretty much the same as perspectives, right? There's some crossover here, and we don't have to fill this one out. And objections, for those that don't know, is pretty much like when you give someone a piece of advice, what do they say in return to retort it and kind of write it off? And that's kind of the topic of the newsletter as a whole. So objections itself is the objection. But benefits from overcoming the problems or achieving those goals. This one's personal, but like this one just comes to mind for me, is good dopamine, right? Good dopamine and less cheap dopamine. I've read books on survival, so it's like you are wired, your psyche is wired for survival. This just shows you the importance of constantly consuming information with intention, so that, and taking notes on it, so that you can have it ready to pull out of your like pool of creativity, and you connect the dots via newsletters, right? So your psyche is wired for survival, and I could come up with an argument for that, so I'm going to leave it at that and write more about it. Big benefit. We'll stop right there. But personal experience. So I could talk about my health experience and being dogmatic about certain diets. What else is there? Learning a little bit about online business and thinking that I'll just use freelancing as freelancing was the best option for beginners. And we'll start there. We have a lot of good information here. So steps, methods, frameworks, or lists. So this is what's going to be included at the bottom of your newsletter, and is going to form the foundation of your threads, like actionable threads, actionable tweets. You could make like a list tweet with these, or other posts like that. And actionable advice is just how you grow as a beginner and how you provide massive values by giving people steps, methods, frameworks, ways to change human behavior, which is what we're aiming after for here. So steps to becoming more open-minded. And this is where things get, like, you have to be creative here, because you have to research and create your own steps or frameworks, right? So I could create a framework, which is like a mental model or something where it's like, okay, when I catch myself, we can talk about this. Here's the steps. Become aware of your limiting beliefs. That's step one. Step two is to pause and determine their rationality. And I'm just coming up with this off the top of my head, right? And that's how you be unique. You're not trying to copy someone else. It does take time. It does take conscious thought, critical thinking to come up with these things. Like, okay, what's the next step? What would I do? What advice would I give myself to stop being closed-minded and to start questioning everything? And right here, we'll actually say question their rationality. What's the next thing? Reframe to a question their rationality. And then how about, research the opposite perspective with an open mind. And then experience those things directly to determine whether they are true or false. We could even throw in like self-experimentation and treating your life as a science project. I talk about that a lot. And again, this gets easier with time. I've been doing this for a long time. But you can come up with your own, and you can start very basic. Don't be afraid to start basic, because people still need that basic advice. They really do. And I mean, there's a reason you go on Twitter and you read basic advice all day and you enjoy reading it. It's a good reminder. So why not join in on that? Next is the big idea. So the big idea in this is pretty much a one-sentence summary. So if you're writing based off of a discovery you made, that discovery is the big idea, right? And you're kind of dissecting it even further here so you can flesh it out and have your own philosophy or way of explaining it and steps frameworks, methods, whatever. And this can be a list as well, right? Like if we're talking about questioning everything, it could be a list on 10 things to question in your life, right? So if it's 10 things to question in your life, let's just create a space here. So like 10, let's do 5. 5 things to question in your life. Your beliefs, and then you can go on to talk about the why when you're actually writing it. Your beliefs, your relationships, your fitness, your quality of life, and your purpose, right? So getting people to start thinking about things, and then you can include a little bit of things here that might actually do better than something else. And it could be like for a different topic that isn't about questioning everything. It could be like 5 habits, because habits aren't a step-by-step list. They're not a framework. It's like 7 habits that'll change your life, right? Or for frameworks, I mean, hell, you can turn the steps into a framework. So I could turn this into the question everything framework, or the open-mindedness. I'm trying to think. The mental expansion method. Something like that. You have fun with it and you create your own names for it, because that's another thing to think about, is that think of like a framework that you love. So I know there's the Eisenhower matrix, which is about like productivity and like how you organize your priorities in each quadrant of the matrix, but that's just made up, right? It's like you draw things out, which is where visualization comes into play. Super powerful. But you draw things out and you start to like piece together puzzles, and you're like, oh, this makes sense. Oh, this doesn't make sense. And eventually with the Eisenhower matrix, he just came up with that and named it. So if you want to make your own on a framework that you really like, then you take that concept, you draw it out, you change things around, and then you rename it to make it your own. I've done this with a lot of big ideas in books. Like this is more of a concept than a framework, but in The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle calls something the pain body, which is like partially the ego, but how the ego makes you feel. And I renamed that for my book as the virus. Now, why? Because I talk about life in terms of a game. And so the virus, I can like metaphors and stuff helps with all of that stuff. Like I can explain it as like it's infected our brain, it's in our programming, and we have to deprogram and then reprogram with our own like patch or our own software that we put into our head, right? So that's where this stuff gets really creative. So the big idea, back to it, behind all of this is that, let's see, I would say a 1-sentence summary of this is like the good life is as simple as asking one question and letting it trigger more. It's just an example, right? This is, again, you don't have to make these perfect. Now, with visualizations, this is where I really like to get creative, and I like to draw them in a notebook. This really, really, really freaking helps. Okay, get a notebook, get something that you can draw out the big idea on, right? So if I were to look at this, the big idea is that one question can lead to other questions. So I can write out what I want to draw here, where it's like, and you don't only do this for the big idea. You can do it for the actual steps. You can do it for the 5 things to question about your life, like in a little matrix where it's like at the top it says 5 things to question in your life, and then it's like priorities, like your beliefs, your relationships, your fitness, your quality of life. And then that just gives you more depth and a cool graphic to include in your newsletter, on Instagram, as your featured image, all of that other stuff. Talk about, you could create like a visual for open-mindedness, like what it means, or like a comparison between closed-mindedness and open-mindedness. Another thing I really like to do is visualize my tweets. So one of the most powerful questions in the world, those are okay. But see, they have to be a fit. They have to give you that inspiration. So none of these do that for me. So I would rather visualize the big idea here to include more depth in my newsletters. And I visualize something for every newsletter. And if you follow me on Instagram, you understand that I include that. That gives my profile more depth and variation and gives me my own unique style because it fits my brand. So the good life is as simple as asking one question and letting it trigger more. So visualizing this, you could have like a negative thought, and then that leads down two paths, which is questioning or reacting. And then this one, the path stops, and then this one, the path continues through other questions until you reach a positive outcome. And you can symbolize this however you want. Like if I were to draw something up right now, this video's kind of dragging on, but this is so important. This is like the most important aspect of all of your writing, is outlining it and letting it sit during the week. That's another huge thing with this, is that it's just not a one and done. You have to add to it throughout the week. You have to munch on it, think about it, contemplate, watch YouTube videos, like watch one YouTube video a week relating to the topic that you're trying to write about, note ideas in there, and just get your ideas, like get your brain to become just an idea machine where you're putting stuff in, you're popping stuff out. You have to match your consumption with your writing, or writing with your consumption. So, please give me some time as I draw up a shitty drawing. But you have like a negative thought, and then it goes down two paths. So you have two paths, and you have, what was it? You have a reaction, and then you could lead to like a stop, and then you have a question, and then that could go to like two more questions. Bear with me. But then those could go even more. And then I'm just going to finish up this drawing, but then they can all connect into a star. And of course, this is just like symbolism. But then you can draw this so much better. But hopefully you can see that, where you have the negative thought at the top, and then it branches into a reaction and a question. And then the reaction stops there. The question goes to another question, two more questions, and then two more questions, and then to a star, which you can make it better, right? Like spend some time with this. Spend like 30 minutes drawing something out. And when I tell you that this will give you the perfect like analogy for your actual article, and a better way of simplifying and creating metaphors, analogies, the things that really catch people's attention, this is the way to do it. I promise. I can't explain it aside from you're going to be drawing something out. You're going to scratch one iteration of it off, and then you're going to draw another thing, and you're going to be like, okay, this is good. And then you're going to want to write about it and explain the graphic, right? That's where the good writing comes in, is when you explain how the graphic works, right? In one of your sections of your newsletter. And then you can include that in your tweets and everything else. So trust me on this. Do this for one of your articles. Visualize it, and then come back, and when you start writing, that is when things get juicy. Okay, that was 30 minutes, and we have more to go over, so hope you're enjoying.